So I think it's ironic about the whole thing is that a lot of people come to the optimization space for real legitimate reasons, but the real critical thing they need to do is actually invite some of the discomfort that they're avoiding in that process so that they will move even faster towards where they want to be.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Danny Bossa podcast. Joined today with Dr. Brad Garner of Mercy Clinic in Republic, Missouri. How's it going, Brad?
It's going great. Great. Thanks for having me, Danny.
So guys, we've had Dr. Brad Garner on the TRT and hormone optimization YouTube channel a few times. He was a big favorite in the corresponding Facebook group that was there. And I've been wanting to have a little chat with him for quite some time. So Brad, you want to give them a little bit of a background of who you are, just to give them an idea?
Sure. So I do what I like to consider to be integrative family medicine. So I do all of the traditional primary care stuff. But probably about 8 years ago, really had an epiphany and sort of a change in how I do practice. And so really started looking at more foundational root cause mechanisms for chronic disease. And so really that led into some things relative to nutritional therapies, and then obviously the hormone optimization stuff. And so I've traveled around a bunch and spent time with different folks learning about all that. And so we do that pretty much on a daily basis, both from the optimization perspective and for the treatment and resolution of chronic disease.
Cool. And I know that we've sent quite a few patients, both men and women, to you in regards to optimization. You're in my list right now of one of those doctors where if the standard TRT clinic can't fix somebody because they've got maybe some other issue that they're not aware of, I say, okay, you got to go to Brad, because Brad's kind of like you strike me a little bit of a real world Dr. House. You'll be able to go and find these other little things that might be affecting their protocols or might be affecting the way they feel, incorporate alternative methods that some of the other doctors won't use. So I've got a bunch of guys that have written me back saying, I used Brad and here's what he has me doing, and it's sometimes falls a little bit out of the standards that we see with the typical doctors who are kind of the horses with the blinders, and they only have that one way of doing things. So I always kind of respected the way you do things, and just respect in general people that'll think a little bit out of the box and don't just stick to one method. So I had you on here because we've had a little bit of talks offline. You wanted to talk a bit about the mindset of some of your patients, perhaps the patients that come in thinking they might get on some form of hormone replacement therapy and think it's just going to fix everything. Others that realize that maybe there's some things that they could be doing better. Maybe other patients that are overthinking things a little bit much and kind of ruining things. So the floor is yours at this point.
Sure. Yeah. I think, first off, thanks for saying the kind stuff. I really do feel like I'm just built to question. And so I like to look under the hood of everything. And I tell patients, because I have some particularly the optimization patients, it's rarely a lack of intelligence or lack of effort. It may be not directed at the right types of things. And so my job is to really question everything. And so when whatever they've come in with that's what I'm going to, whether they've seen different providers or whatever, I'm going to look under the hood and not take anything at face value. We're going to reevaluate everything. And so that's kind of led into a lot of interesting areas, and it's been a lot of fun. But yeah, I think some of the stuff that I've noticed with my patients, there's some parallels between what we would see with patients who weren't necessarily on that optimization track, but were there for primary care, relative to what was most beneficial for things like chronic insomnia and anxiety and depression from a mindset perspective, and how that then would also parallel and apply in the area of optimization. We would see folks that would really always be looking to the next thing to find the perfect answer for that thing, which was kind of external to what they were doing internally in terms of mindset. And so I like to use sleep as an example. People would be focusing on, well, what's the next supplement that I could do for sleep? What's the next hormone strategy I could use for sleep? What do I need to do with my lights? How cold does it need to be in my room? All these sorts of things. And all of those ended up being really an avoidance strategy for the discomfort of being awake. And that was a really critical step for people to make, to recognize the importance of being uncomfortable in that spot. Because what happens, and Andrew Huberman talks a little bit about this when he discusses things about stress response and dopamine release and all these sort of things, is there's a benefit to anxiety from a broad perspective, in that anxiety draws us away from something or moves us towards something with a purpose. And so if we avoid all feelings or sensations of anxiety, we actually will start to manipulate that reaction and response in a way that everything becomes a threat. And it's basically because, like sleep as an example, going back to that, when wakefulness becomes the threat, because we're afraid of being awake because of our understanding of the importance of sleep from an optimization perspective, when wakefulness is a threat because the next day we have lots of things that we have to do, we have kids to take care of, we're going to be grumpy, all these sorts of things, there's a fight or flight response that happens in that space. And fight or flight response is a very sort of non-logical response, in that it is just, there's a bear, let's run. And so then there's neurotransmitter releases and all these sort of things that happen where from a logical perspective, we think, well, if the wakefulness is the threat, then it should just make us go to sleep. But that's not the level of logic that's happening. It is just, there's a bear. So the wakefulness becomes the bear. It releases neurotransmitters and all these sort of things that happen. And so then we have flights of ideas, and it turns into insomnia. Well, then we try to fix it, because that's the sort of approach of all optimizers, is to fix it. If I can identify it, I can fix it. And sleep is exactly the opposite thing. So the more you try to do to fix sleep, the harder it becomes. And this is something that if anyone's ever struggled with chronic insomnia, they'd notice that. And so, yeah. And actually, in full disclosure, the reason that I actually came up and started to see this in my patients is because I struggled with it as well. I had chronic insomnia for 2 to 3 years, and I literally averaged 2 to 3 hours of sleep a night, and it was atrocious. And the thing that's interesting about insomnia is that everybody who's in that place feels like theirs is the worst ever. No one really understands. This is permanent. This is going to be a really dark place. And none of those things are really true, but everyone feels the same way in that spot. And so what has to happen in that place is to retrain our brain to be comfortable in the uncomfortable. And so once we become comfortable in that uncomfortable place of wakefulness, that threat detection and fight or flight response starts to turn down, and then the natural sleepiness takes over. It's the difficulty is that it's not simple from a sort of logical perspective, because that's a very difficult bridge to cross. It's counter to everything that we see within optimization. The harder I work, the better I will get at X, Y, or Z. But the truth of it is that's how our brain works. And so if we lean into that, then we would start to see that there's some benefit there, because through that uncomfortable spot, if we are able to lay in bed awake and rest consciously, then rest will come. It's just not on our time schedule. And that's part about retraining our brain to see that there is no bear. And that's kind of the idea with that part.
Yeah. With me, it was very much what you're saying, where I went through a period, and the insomnia started with due to a failed experiment with nandrolone, which is something I've talked about once, where I was taking lower doses and I was getting benefits from it. I was taking about 50 to 100 milligrams a week and really getting some benefits. But then again, peer pressure, everyone's saying, oh, you should take more. If you tolerate, take more. Yeah. And I kept raising my dose while I was training, and I was like, I'm getting stronger, and I heal faster, and I just feel overall better. And then it just kind of switched something off in my brain, where I was getting crazy anxiety, panic, claustrophobia that only occurred at night. So during the day I was completely fine, but at night it was really, really bad. And I tried, again, instead of trying to address the issue, Again, is my room dark enough? Is it cold enough? Then I'm texting back and forth with Andrew Huberman because he's got this sleep stack that he was talking about. I'm like, I'm trying your sleep stack and it's not it's not working. And then I would, I told him like I just added L-tryptophan and I've tried this and what do you think about that? And he'd get back to me and I'm trying stuff. And then I had this, this pharmacy worth in a cabinet of supplements that I was trying. And it seemed to me that as I kept adding things that should have helped, it was making the sleep even worse. And then at one point I just said, okay, the hell with this. This is stupid. I'm just going to stop all the supplements because I don't know what's causing what. Let me lie there. And as you said, rest consciously.
Yeah.
So I would just rest with my eyes closed saying, there is no bear.
Yeah.
As much as my body, there's no bear. Open your eyes. You're going to see there's no bear. Close your eyes and relax and relax. And night after night after night after night. And eventually I just was so bloody exhausted that I slept. And I woke up one morning realizing like, I think I slept 8 hours or 9 hours.
Yeah.
And then I was fine. After that point was fine. But it was a very, very, very difficult thing that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy.
Oh yeah, no, it's I think insomnia is brutal. And if folks have never really struggled with that, they have really very little perspective on it. And I think, your experience is common and I mean, it mirrors my own, but what I see with patients too. And in the middle of that, I came across a book called The Sleep Book. And the author's name is Guy Meadows, and he's a sleep specialist in Europe. And he has a clinic that he actually deals with chronic insomnia in this way. And it's based in something called acceptance and commitment therapy. And it's a biobehavioral, psychological technique that's really well studied. And it's super fascinating. And so, as optimizers often do, I went down that rabbit hole of looking at all the things that go along with that. And that's where I started to see its application in multiple areas, including other chronic issues and optimization. And basically the concept is that you're accepting the reality of the situation that you're in. You're not resigning yourself to the fate, but you're accepting the presence of that thing as information. I am awake. But you're committed to moving through that hard place because on the other side of the discomfort is the thing that you want the most, which is rest. And so you're committed to being in that uncomfortable spot, moving through that to the place of rest. And that's the idea of being accepting of the reality and committed to moving through. And so what was interesting is, that book is fantastic. And if anyone struggled with chronic insomnia, I don't care how long it is a game changer. We've used this on patients that were on Ambien for 15 years. I mean, just all sorts of things. And it's really, really good. But what we found to be true is if you look at it, there are a couple guys. One's name is Stephen Hayes, and he is the sort of original psychologist that discovered these sort of innate techniques in the midst of his own panic attacks. And he has a TED Talk on YouTube. And then another guy named Russ Harris. He's a physician from, I think he's Australian or New Zealand. I'm not sure. But they've got a lot of stuff that's out there. That's a lot of free information that's really helpful. But they come at it from a perspective of depression, anxiety, PTSD, chronic pain, all those sort of things. What's really fascinating to me is that each of those situations, those are labels. So anxiety, depression, PTSD are labels on a physical manifestation of a neurologic process. And so from a root cause perspective, whether you're talking about any of those things, to including insomnia, they all start with a discomfort. They all start with some sort of thought, emotion, physical sensation that is uncomfortable. And it's the movement through that uncomfortable place that takes them to the thing that they value the most. And that's really what this is about. And so when it comes to changing with optimization, folks, what we started to see was the people with the most success in their overall either short-term goals or long-term goals were the ones that would innately fall into this. And actually, Andrew Huberman, another thing that he talks about is David Goggins, one of the Navy SEAL who's super hardcore. He sort of fell into this process on his own in terms of his own achievements. He recognized that there was value in doing things that were extremely uncomfortable and doing them because they were uncomfortable, because they were the way toward what he valued the most. And so that's what we started to see with our patients, is so we could get them to see value in the discomfort of moving through that place would change everything for them. So whether it was, doing things when it comes, and like, for example, diet wise, I mean, let's be honest, most adults, when it comes to dietary stuff, we act like toddlers. I mean, we just want to do what we want to do. It's what we prefer. It's whatever makes us comfortable. And the truth of it is that if we addressed our dietary stuff with as much vigor as guys do their hormone optimization strategies and as much attention, it would change everything. I mean, it would just change everything. And so getting to the place where we can even see, like, for example, one thing that I think is really, this is a kind of a silly example, but for me, I grew up in South Central Mississippi. Both my parents went to LSU in Baton Rouge. I am a huge LSU fan. Seafood is that's what happens. I hate fish. I hate the smell of it. I hate the texture of it. Like, I would try to convince my parents that I was allergic to fish when I was young because I just had one. So, but if I'm going to be what I propose to be and be healthy, then fish should probably be part of my diet. I mean, that's a healthy thing. So I just picked something simple. I said, look, I'm going to eat fish because I don't like it. And that's what I'm going to do. And so I just started. I noticed the smell that I hated. I noticed the texture that I hated, and I ate it anyway. And what Andrew Huberman talks about is that when we have a way out, when we have an option of doing the hard thing, and then we also have an option of getting out, and we choose the hard thing anyway, the brain releases dopamine. And so that release of dopamine drives effort to move toward, and there's a reward mechanism in that. And so then the next time you're exposed to that threat detection system is a little bit less sensitive, and you can continue to move through that place to the things you value the most, which I find to be an incredibly useful tool for patients that were trying to fix chronic disease or that are pursuing optimization. Because in each of those areas where there's dietary stuff, exercising when you don't want to, doing some exercises that you don't prefer, maybe a guy likes to exercise, but they don't like a particular exercise, but that would be the best one for what they need to do. Like, I hate to run. Okay. I really don't like to run. I like to lift weights. I do not like to run. My running is lifting weights faster, but I know that's probably got some cardiovascular benefit for me. So I'm going to have to start doing more of that on purpose. And so there's a way to utilize how our brain is designed in this that I think gets left on the table for a lot of folks who are seeking optimization. And so that's kind of what we've seen with our patients.
Yeah. I had a video with Dave Lee on this channel where we kind of touched upon that, where he recommends a lot of the guys that he works with to take up martial arts, because he's like, if you're going into a ring and getting hit, and you're trying to avoid getting hit and whatever else, and you're spending a couple hours a week doing that, once you're out of the ring, life seems a hell of a lot easier because you're not walking around worried about being punched in the face. Like, everything just seems so much less less stressful, so put yourself in a significantly more stressful position to get used to that level of stress, and then everything else just feels easy. I've gone through that with my own business, which has nothing to do with this. I've got an IT business where there were things I wanted to do that I said, okay, I don't know, that might work out well, and this might be a failure, and then what happens if this, and I said, just go do it. And as I was doing them, I'm realizing I'm getting them done, and I'm being successful. I'm like, well, maybe if I can do this, I don't know about these things, maybe I'm pushing my luck, or let me go. And every single time I would try to do something, I was getting it done. And it just got to the point now that from like a business perspective, that anxiety of thinking, well, there's certain things I can't do. Well, every time I try to do something, I get it done, and I'm successful at it. But I had to put myself into that position to learn it. So now I'm doing stuff in this past year that I never would have even conceived of doing before. Which is one of the reasons, guys, if you're wondering why I haven't posted a video in the last month, I've been really, really busy with work. So I'm going to be getting key people to interview from time to time and do it when I have the time, because my life is changing quite a bit. So outside of the sleep factor, what are the things, let's say we can touch a bit on the diet. I guess this talk is very much like kind of like you're as strong as your weakest link in a matter of speaking. It is.
I think that how I see this is really, this is part of the toolbox. I mean, if anyone's seeking optimization, or correction of chronic disease, you have to come at it. And I'm an ex-military guy, so you have to come at it from multiple fronts. You can't just come at it from one direction. if a guy has 4 flat tires and I just fix one by giving him testosterone, he's going to get down the road a little bit better, but it's still going to be a rough ride. And so we have to really look at what are all the things that are there. And so there's this, nutritional component to it. There's the exercise component to it. There's a hormone component to it. And then there's this mindset part. And none of them are mutually exclusive and all are really, really important. I mean, even that dopamine response that I talked about earlier is downstream of testosterone and thyroid and vitamin D. So it's not as though this is to replace those things. It's to augment those things and help them work as they're designed to do. The thing that's interesting is that professionals are really good at what they do because over time they've identified a process and they do the same thing over and over again. And the contrast to that is amateurs who switch things up at every turn. And so we find that to be true as well, particularly within optimizers, because if we can identify it, we can manage it. And if we can come up with a different idea, we'll change it. And so people are frequently changing things so often and pursuing and adding little things here and there that, and it's all honestly in a response to the discomfort of not meeting expectation, whatever that is. And so if we can really kind of take a step back and say, all right, what is it that I value most in this process? And what is it? And is everything that I'm doing on a daily basis geared towards moving in that direction? And once I identified that, if it's based on some good solid stuff that you know about and that there's really no need to vary so frequently, identify that and just be committed to the day-to-day process of showing up there, recognizing that there's going to be some place that's not going to make sense. I tell patients all the time is they're trying to pursue a mountaintop experience and they're going to a mountain they've never been on. And so they're going up the side of the mountain, and you don't do that without a guide because you'll get to some hairy spots that may look pretty intimidating and it may not be how you expect it. And you have to look to the guide to say, okay, yeah, that's true. This is a tough spot, not to ignore it, anything like that. But on the other side of the tough spot is where you want to go. And the view is incredible. But if you're not allowing folks to be a part of that process and just being consistent with it, then that's when people turn around, they'll switch directions and all this sort of stuff. And they never really get to that space that they need to be at. And so really, I think from a mindset perspective, it's super important to be consistent and be simple as possible. I think sleep is a great example because everything sounds like a great idea when you're in a bad spot. And you'll try every last possible thing. And we do that with a lot of other stuff too. And all of it is an avoidance strategy at the end of the day. And so just leaning into the idea of there is a process in place and moving forward without an attachment to the outcome. There's another guy, his name is Daniel Erickson, who he actually is a sleep specialist, and he wrote a book called This is Natto. And it's not nattokinase, the supplement. It's natto from not attached to the outcome. And it's a very short book, and it leans into these concepts of, and he actually started with sleep as his sort of core sort of malady that he was trying to address. And it branched into a lot of things, but this idea of I'm moving forward in a direction, committed to a process that's getting me towards what I value without any sort of attachment or expectation to the outcome of that thing. And so that just really changes our mindset in terms of being present in the moment, which is critical because none of us are robots. And I mean, you've mentioned you haven't done as many videos because life is changing, right? And your most important job in life is to be a husband and a dad. I mean, like the videos are awesome and you do great work, but that is the most important thing for you. And if you get so caught in those things and you miss the presence of the moment of those that need you the most, what are we really doing? What is it? Yep. And so that's the thing is like, okay, are the things that I'm doing on a daily basis, are they moving me towards the things that I really value? And, am I missing the presence of the moment? And so there's this place for recognizing the discomfort, but creating enough mental space to where you can respond in a way that doesn't lead you away from the things that you value. So Viktor Frankl, he was a psychologist who survived, or psychologist, psychiatrist, I can't recall which he was, but he survived 4 Holocaust camps. I mean, the guy's, a mental beast as far as that goes. But he wrote some books. He wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And he was, there was a statement attributed to him. Some say he didn't say it, someone else said it, but it was in his book. And basically he said, in all of life, there is a stimulus and then there is a response. And in between is a space. And that's where life is. And so in all of these things, we have to get to the place where you create that mental space. And and it has to start with noticing the thoughts, the emotions, the physical sensations that make us uncomfort, and create enough space where we can respond in a way, not in a knee-jerk fashion that we've done forever and ever to fix and fix and fix, but just to notice it and to move in the direction that we're designed to move in for those things that we value the most. And, that's the thing that I found to be most helpful for myself personally, but also with the folks that are seeking to improve their health.
Yeah, I think that the main thing that I see with people today is they don't realize the time that some of these things are going to take to get to where they want to go. They're seeing, they're going on Instagram and they're seeing before and after pictures. Look at this guy, he was 300 pounds and now he's 180 pounds ripped and he looks like a supermodel. Right. And then look at all these other people, they're so happy. And so you're trying to figure out, okay, what are these people doing that I'm not doing? What are they taking? What are they eating? How are they exercising? What workout? What supplement? What vitamin? How much TRT or HRT? And perhaps if I do that, I'll be like them. And I think they think when you brought up the mountain earlier, they figure, okay, well, if I put all these things in place, I can kind of like hop into the chopper and the chopper's just going to fly me up to the top of the mountain. And I land on the mountain and I'm like, I'm here. I'm like you guys now. See? Right. And they don't realize when you're starting that journey of saying, I want to get from here to that mountain, even if you're doing everything right, doesn't mean that this process is going to be easy. Meaning like if I do the, get on TRT and I exercise and nutrition and my sleep is great and whatever, and I'll just give it a little bit of time. This is going to be it's a freaking difficult, hard, terrorizing. Sure. It's a pain in the ass, but once you get there, it really is awesome. But I don't think people realize how much effort it is, how much dedication, how much consistency is key. They think that I can do something a couple of weeks, and then if I half-ass another couple of weeks and hop back on, well, I'm still going to... No, you won't. I mean, this last month, I have not trained. I haven't stepped foot in my gym in 5 weeks. Right. I've been missing breakfasts. I've been missing lunches. I eat my supper quick because then I have an evening meeting, and then I'm snacking at night because I'm hungry. My body doesn't look the way it a month ago. You know what I mean? Like the consistency is gone. I can't just say I can do all this and then pick it up from where I left off. Sure. I've now delayed. That consistency is key because every day it's a little inch closer, a little inch closer, a little inch closer. And it's the ones that are really consistent and stick to it that get there and address all these other things that you're talking about. But I think most people just don't realize how many factors are involved to get to be like these people that we're seeing, that we're saying, I want to have this guy's life, be it the way he looks or his success or his financial status or his social stat. These are things that took effort, to get there. Yeah. And I completely agree with you. It's that sort of idea of 1% better every day, that sort of compounding interest concept where, it's not about, I tell patients all the time, it's not about being perfect because you don't have to have a unanimous votes to win an election. You just have to have the majority. So it's, am I showing up today for who I want to be when I grow up? And really, what do I value most? Because like we talk a lot about goals, but goals really are things you check off a list, So like for me, the things that I value are being a Christ follower, being a husband, being a dad, being, all that I can be health wise. Those things never get checked off a list. And so what I do on a daily basis is in terms of goals is geared towards that. And if there's a day where that doesn't meet all those standards, I'm not necessarily attached to the outcome of that part of it. I'm just moving in a direction. I'm committed to being who I need to be today.
And some days it's not going to be the best that it could be. And some days it's going to be rough. And I think that, you said it. I mean, and I used sleep as an example. I keep going back to sleep because when it's a bad thing, it really marks your life for a long time. Sleep is a great example. Like I still have nights where it's rough. And it's very easy for my brain because it remembers, and those neural tracks are still there. And this is why moderation doesn't work with dietary stuff. And our preferences have to be squashed on a daily basis just because those neural tracks are still there. You can't you can't take them away, but you can lay on top new information. So like when I have a rough night, my brain immediately will go to, okay, here we go again. And, it's going to be that sort of thing. But I have to recognize that is just a night, and I can't let that night beat me twice, because with insomnia, that's the deal, is there's typically a trigger, like you had mentioned, the nandrolone. I mean, for me, I had some other stuff going on, and I had just switched my protocol and added HCG, and I really kind of wonder if that wasn't, I mean, I had all those life stressors at the time, but HCG was a really sort of pivotal thing in that time where it may have made my insomnia worse rather than helping. And so, so all of that started to build, and it turned into years because I didn't address the things at the root. And so recognizing that even if you move forward, things are not going to be great every day of the year. I mean, because life still happens, and we're not going to be robots, but being able to be committed to that process, going back to process, going back to value, continues and gives you so that discipline to move forward when your motivation has failed. And that's really the thing is sort of moving through that place and almost inviting the discomfort, because that invitation to discomfort makes it a familiar feeling rather than a scary feeling, and I use the example of Walmart for my patients because it kind of hits home for people. So some people who struggle with chronic panic attacks and agoraphobia and stuff, they don't like to be around big crowds. So they won't go to Walmart, and so they will do delivery or pick up or whatever. And so that's one of those situations where they have a choice to do the hard thing. And then they choose the easy thing. Well, if they choose the hard thing, then they will go into that place, and yes, they will feel short of breath. Yes, they will have their heart race. Yes, they'll have all these flight of ideas and sweaty palms and all that. But they will release dopamine in that moment. And then the next exposure will be less intense, and they'll be able to move through that place through the thing that they value. And the thing that's funny is not value because they value the things at Walmart. Most people get anxious about those situations because they actually value connection with other humans. And in that space, they're not in control of what those people think of them because there's so many of them. They don't know what they're going to think of them. They don't know what they're going to do. They don't know. Well, they maybe feel threatened, so they don't know how they're going to respond physically to them. So there's this thing that they value is actually connection with humans. But to avoid the physical discomfort, they just go somewhere else. Well, then it starts your brain's like, cool, I'll look for that same sort of physical sensation and warn you next time. So now family gatherings, you have a little bit of a heart race, a little bit of a flight of ideas, and now the family gathering's too much. So I'm not going to go to that. And so then your world becomes narrower and narrower, all out of an avoidance of a discomfort. Whereas if we would just stick in that spot and say, hey, bring it. Let's have the discomfort. Let's have that thing that's there, because that is a rep towards moving to where I want to be. And really moving in that space is really the thing that I found to be most helpful for patients.
I had something similar about your Walmart example. Back in my early 20s, I was having anxiety and panic attacks for a period of about maybe 2 years or so. And I remember that sensation of going into a Walmart or a big mall. In my case, it wasn't a fear of, well, maybe to an extent, it was being in this big space without a quick exit and saying, well, what if I have a panic attack right here? What if I have a panic attack and I pass out right here? What's going to happen? And I guess it would play, on what would, what's everyone going to think? Yeah. They see me out cold on the floor. Yeah. So I would avoid a lot of these spaces. Yeah. And eventually when I realized I have a fear, I got to go over the fear. I was purposely trying to spend an hour, 2 hours a day walking through a mall. Yeah. Just, on the verge of collapse and just, like, grow a pair, Dan. It's okay. It's a mall. See this little kid? He's having fun. See the mom? She's okay. All these people are okay. You're okay. Everyone's freaking okay. Just, but it's not. And it's tough to overcome. But putting myself in that situation long enough eventually I found myself calming down.
Yeah.
But had I just the times I was avoiding it, anytime I would step in, it was like, it was terrifying. And in regards to the enjoying the time in between your stimulus and the response, a fantastic example of that is the guys getting on TRT. And, I'm on my fourth shot and I'm wondering now, should I lower my dose? Cause so-and-so said that I should. And they're just obsessing over the every little sensation and, oh, I gave myself my shot and there's a drop that came out. Does that mean that now I didn't give myself enough? Yeah. They're doing labs every 4 weeks. Well, now my estrogen is here and last time it was here. And now should I, and it's like, guys, just trust the process.
For sure.
Start somewhere. Stop thinking about it. Go live your damn life for 8 weeks or 12 weeks and then reassess. But some people just can't do that and are just stuck with the details, stuck with all this granular BS. Sorry. And distract themselves from what's really important.
Oh, sure. Yeah. The hypervigilance that people will exhibit in these scenarios is it's really astounding a lot of times. And you're right. I mean, anytime we start anything, whether it's TRT or thyroid or diet change, I see it all the same is that, they're so vigilant in terms of assessing, and every little thing has to be related to that instead of it's life. Like there are things that are happening that I don't have control over. And I think there's this perception that because we have some understanding of how all these things work, that everything should be fixable and it should all be nothing. And again, that is all a strategy to avoid discomfort in life, rather than seeing that part of life, and this is not to be sort of morbid about it, but it's just the truth. I mean, part of life is uncomfortable. And the other thing is, I mean, from a scriptural perspective, which is how I do life, the Bible says that iron sharpens iron, and it does that because of friction, not because it's smooth. And so there's a benefit for moving into this place that has a little bit of friction to it in order, if we really want optimization. So I think it's ironic about the whole thing is that a lot of people come to the optimization space for real legitimate reasons, but the real critical thing they need to do is actually invite some of the discomfort that they're avoiding in that process so that they will move even faster towards where they want to be.
Yeah. And the more that they invite and the more they overcome, the stronger they get.
Oh, absolutely.
Because
absolutely.
You cannot get stronger without some discomfort.
Oh, yeah.
That's the discomfort that makes us stronger.
100%. I mean, that's 100. Susan David is a psychologist, and I read a lot of stuff. But Susan David is a psychologist, and she wrote a book about emotional resilience. And that's the same idea. I mean, if you develop some emotional resilience, that applies in every area of life. I mean, literally every area. I mean, your spouse dies, you need to change your diet, you need to exercise, your kids are being delinquent. I mean, whatever the issue is, there's an emotional resilience that's not about ignoring our emotions. We're designed for emotions, but they're information. We're really not designed to be driven by them. The same thing is true for thoughts. Thoughts are information. And then we get into this prediction game that we're all terrible at based on our thoughts. And so if we would just be able to be with them for what they are and then create that space, then we can move in that direction. And I think the first step is noticing that process beginning. And one of the things, I keep referring to Andrew Huberman. I mean, and I like to pick stuff from lots of people. I mean, there may be different things that we disagree on with different folks, but you can learn from anybody if you will take the time to do it. And one of the things he talks about is non-sleep deep rest in terms of this noticing practice. And so non-sleep deep rest is basically it's a yoga nidra is what it is. It's basically, it doesn't necessarily have any sort of unusual yoga poses or chants or mantras or anything. It's just basically a body scan exercise where you're working through scanning, and it has a script where you kind of notice you're laying there with your eyes closed and you notice your head touching the floor and you're noticing your nose and you're noticing the air coming in. You just basically scan the whole body. Well, immediately our monkey minds are going to be all over the place, right? I mean, that's just how it works. It's going to be like, this is a waste of your time. This is why you're doing this, blah, 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 blah. Well, And then once the process is so once you notice that thought show up that you're wasting your time, you just redirect, play it back to the place that you were thinking. And you keep going back and forth, and you may do it 100 times in that 20 or 30 minutes that you're doing that. The point of it is that's that first step of noticing the thought, emotion, pain that's uncomfortable and redirecting to the present moment. That's the first place to make changes for a lot of folks. And also that when it comes to insomnia was an incredible tool for me, because I could see that I could be conscious and in that space and rest. And so once I could figure that out and do that in the daytime, I recognized, okay, the nighttime, I can just lay in my bed and do the same thing. And so I would lay in my bed and I would do that. And then that thought would come of, oh, well, you're not asleep yet. You got to get up at 5 a.m. You got to deliver these patients tomorrow. You got to do blah, 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 blah. And so then I would just redirect. And so over time, you would be able to move into that space of, okay, yeah. And now you've got in the background, your brain does it for you. It's really super fascinating. And there are several scripts that he directs people to on YouTube for that. But one of the things he talks about with it is that non-sleep deep rest has been studied with EEG to 30 minutes of it to be equivalent of 2 hours of deep sleep. And so I started to just look at it like, hey, if I don't rest at nighttime, I'm just going to pick 20 minutes, 30 minutes of the day. I'm going to do this and I'll be fine. So then that pressure to be unconscious at nighttime changed. And so when the thoughts would show up in the daytime about sleep, then I'd be, hey, there's that thought again about not sleeping last night. And I wouldn't have to even address it. There it is. It's information. And just move on through to what I value more. And so then sleep becomes less powerful in my life. And then, and the same thing is true for all these other things that we're talking about optimization wise. And so that was a useful tool as well. So that mindfulness sort of idea of uncomfortable and create that space so that then I can be present in the moment, was another thing that has been helpful as well.
Yeah. I find being present for me, being present in the moment is very difficult. My brain is all over the place. And it's just, I don't know if it's just the way I'm wired or the way I'm designed, or is it something that I could eventually fix and control? I've just got 10 trillion things being worked out at any given moment. From the second my eyes open in the morning, my heart starts kind of pounding and I'm feeling out of breath because it's almost like the brain's going. No, I'm with you. And when I go to bed, it takes a long time for that process to ramp down. And it's just, I wonder if some of us are more wired that way than others.
I do. Yeah. I agree with you. I think some are. And I'm actually one of those guys as well. And I used to, before I understood any of this stuff, before I understood the dietary and the hormones and then this mindset stuff, I was on stimulants because I apparently always had ADD or ADHD and had no idea. And I got into my chief resident year after medical school, and everybody gets to a point where the wheels kind of come off, right? So that was, so I had all my obligations relative to obviously home life. My wife and I were married, and we had twins that were like about 3 years old, and we didn't live anywhere near family. And then I had all my educational obligations and stuff. And then as chief resident, you're in charge of like the call schedule for the whole residency and just a bunch of other stuff. So anyway, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't even think straight. There's just 1,000 different things. And so at that point I started one of the doctors that I worked with had started prescribing me some stimulus to try to focus better. And it was helpful, but never complete. And so even now still yet, my wife all the time, she knows if I start talking, there's going to be like 100 ideas that are coming out right now. Now they may not ever get done. But I've got ideas. And so I can completely relate to that. So all that to say is, yes, there are people I think that are just wired in that way and actually have a significant advantage in a lot of areas because of it. So I don't think that's something that we should necessarily try to squash altogether, but to harness it is really powerful. And so I think, yes, it is something that we all have the ability to improve on. And yes, it will always be a struggle. Like sleep for me is always going to be, it's a part of my story, but it doesn't have to rule my life. And so just like being distracted generally is a part of my story, but it doesn't have to rule my life. And so what I found is that as I started to intentionally practice some of these things, it really started to, in the background, operate in a way that allowed me to have better intention on being present in the moment. And it still takes effort for sure, because, there are times I'll find myself in my thoughts, and everybody else is around and I'm in my own little world right here. So yeah, it's a challenge.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Even when I started these videos interviewing people, they would start talking.
Yeah.
And then my brain is
You're
like,
in a different conversation.
Next week you got that meeting with so-and-so. And it's like, and then the guy would finish a sentence and there's this dead space because he's anticipating that I say something. And I'm like, oh shit. Like I was not there. And I had to really practice, like, no, just put everything else aside. You're here with Brad.
Yeah.
It's you and Brad. You're listening to Brad. And it's, that in itself, I found it unbelievably challenging, more than I thought. When you have a conversation with someone just on a day-to-day thing and it's not being recorded, it's not going to be something you're putting on YouTube. It's one thing you can kind of scooch off and no one's going to know. But this was practice for quite some time that I had to get better and better at it. But it's like you said, it can be a curse and a blessing. For me, it's a blessing because of what I'm able to accomplish, but it's a curse in regards to how challenging it is. But that brings us right back to the thing we were discussing at the beginning of, if you want to succeed, it is uncomfortable and it is challenging and it is difficult. So, Brad, I thank you very much for the time you took here. It was very interesting. I've been trying to get some talks that are, a little less geared towards the typical regular TRT stuff and more towards some of the other things. So it's this was the welcome addition. So thank you very much for your time.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. And I really thank you for all the stuff you do. I think you do a great job with all the videos and folks you have on and the information you put in for folks.
Thank you very much.